Hello and welcome back to Cymru Rails. Recently I took a special trip to the far west of Wales to attend the Fishguard Harbour Railway Heritage Day. This fantastic one-off event, held at the Stena Line ferry terminal, was a brilliant collaboration between South West Wales Connected Community Rail Partnership and Stena Line. This day was dedicated to celebrating the rich, essential history of the Fishguard Harbour Railway and the port, and was proudly held as part of the nationwide Railway 200 celebrations. The event featured a brand new exhibition, talks from historians, model railway displays, and even live music performances. And in this video, we're going to take a look at the journey and all the action from this event. Now, I have to confess, despite being based in West Wales, I actually have never had a reason to venture up to Fishguard by train before, so it was wonderful to finally make that journey and pair that first visit with an event as important as this. As we arrived into Fishguard and Goodwick station, the platform was absolutely packed, a clear sign that the organisers had done a fantastic job promoting the travel by rail sort of thing that they had, because Fishguard and Goodwick is the stations slightly before Fishguard Harbour. Either that or it's a quite a bit of an open walk basically to get to the harbour station. And that's what they were advertising. You go to Fishguard and Goodwick, and then you get the opportunity to ride the train for a short few minutes, and then you're there at Fishguard Harbour. Not only did this show that they'd done an excellent job of promoting it, but it also showed that people are interested in learning about history and learning about the railway's impact on Fishguard. Everyone was queuing up to take the special shuttle train for the final stretch to Fishguard Harbour Station, which is where the event was actually being held. It was here I actually learned something new. The harbour station itself isn't actually owned by Transport for Wales. Instead, it's owned by Stena Line, who manage the ferries. They do a wonderful job of keeping the station looking incredibly sharp, and compared to other stations in West Wales, I think this is a little bit above the board. It was a fitting location for a heritage event just like this. I thoroughly enjoyed local history and especially railway history, and this event was simply awash with it. There were dedicated talks running throughout the day, covering various topics related to the railway and Fishguard's past. Let's start with the exhibition itself. This brand new display, which is neatly tucked away in a small room at the side of the station area, explored the comprehensive history of the railway and the port. The presentation was excellent, with boards that had been very nicely printed. Now, I pretty much own every historical book that's been published on the railways of Pembrokeshire, and yet there were several photographs on display here which I had genuinely never seen before. It was lovely to see them nicely printed and displayed along a few railway artifacts, including some uniforms and lanterns. There was also a small but perfectly formed model railway here to enjoy as well, bringing the history right to life. One of the highlights of the event was a model railway display which had been brought along by Christopher Jeater. He had set up his beautiful S-scale representation of the iconic Polar Express, which, if you've been watching my channel, we've actually seen that earlier in the year at the Port Talbot Model Railway exhibition. Beyond that stunning model, Christopher had also brought a loop of 00 gauge track which was set up in the middle of the layout. The model running on this circle of track is known as the Big One from the Galaxy Railways anime series. It was brilliant to see this kind of creativity on display at a heritage event. It perfectly connects the rich history of the railways to the future and the passion found in modern model railroading. Of course, the heart of any heritage day is the history, and throughout the event there were several fascinating talks. The one that I thankfully managed to be able to film in full was delivered by Jim Morgan. Jim specifically covered the momentous arrival of the Great Western Railway to Fishguard, touching on the monumental engineering influences of figures such as Brunel. It was a brilliant summary of just how critical the railway line and the port were originally established. I hope you enjoy listening to his talk.
Right, I better put my glasses on so I can. So, the Great Western Railway opened the railway from London to Bristol. That was a real success. It did very well. London was a very obviously a very prosperous place. Bristol was also very prosperous. Bristol was very well connected, particularly by ship, to South Wales as well. So investors wanted to open another successful railway. So they asked Isambard King de Brunel and many of the same backers to look at a railway to Ireland. Now, obviously, you can't go all the way to Ireland by rail, but to a suitable port and then a ferry to Ireland. And they got parliamentary approval in 1845 to start building that railway. Most of it was built. It was called the South Wales Main Line. It started from a junction near the River Severn in the Bristol area and then went via Newport, Cardiff, Swansea, Carmarthen to near Fishguard. And this is the critical bit. It never actually got to Fishguard. The planned arrangements at Fishguard were not clear, though. In those days, if you got an Act of Parliament to build a railway, you could just say, destination, a field near somewhere. So you didn't have to be absolutely specific about it. But they were tightened up in the 1880s so that that gave the North Pembrokeshire Railway a very strong hand in negotiating with the Great Western. Now, Fishguard was the shortest route to Ireland, we all know that, and Brunel had thoughts of extending the jetty at Goodwick. But the bay could be badly affected by northerly winds. Well, it still is, isn't it? There was a strong lobby to operate the ferries from Milford Haven as well, where port facilities could be provided more cheaply. So it was that balance between as fast a journey time and the cost of building a port. There was also a larger population around Milford Haven who probably used the trains. And Brunel surveyed the north coast of Pembrokeshire and he identified Abermawr as a possible site for a new harbour. And those of you who know Abermawr will know the sort of culvert under a level surface on the far side of the bay, which was a little bit that was started. There was more started towards the junction with the main line, but that was the idea. But the trouble was the failure of the potato harvest in 1845-1846 caused widespread starvation in Ireland. And the economic conditions were really meant that nobody much was likely to travel. So they decided what they needed to do was build a cheap railway, so they went to Milford Haven. So in 1851, they decided to abandon North Pembrokeshire and go to Milford Haven. And the ferries operated from there for quite some time. So the South Wales Railway was built from Torfason Road to Haverfordwest and then to Neyland, where the port facilities were constructed. Brunel did carry out some construction work through Fishguard Gorge. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. There was a talk at Theatre Gwaun quite recently about Abermawr and the road to the things that Brunel was looking at. The rock in Fishguard Gorge is a rhyolite, which is a volcanic rock which is very, very hard. So gunpowder didn't do a very good job at enabling blasting. So it was a very difficult job to build it through Fishguard Gorge. Abermawr was, not really feasible economically, so they decided to go to Neyland. The railway to Neyland opened in 1854 to Haverfordwest, 1856 to Neyland. At this point, there were no serious plans to build a railway to Fishguard and Goodwick. Now, it's thanks to Slate that Fishguard got its railway. Slate had been quite a rosebush for a long time, But those of you who know the slate quarrying industry, and I was talking with a geologist last week about this, it's not a continuous process to excavate slate, except where you've got large beds of slate, like in North Wales. And that is one of the reasons why somebody decided to invest in the North Pembrokeshire Railway. And I'll tell you a bit more detail about that. There's a guy called Edward Cropper. He was a merchant banker. He was a director of the London and North Western Railway Company. Now, at the time, the London and North Western Railway Company was the biggest railway company in the world. In fact, it was the biggest company in the world. If you were a director of that, then you were rich and influential, and you knew a lot about transport. Now, he had visited the North Wales quarries and seen how prosperous slate was, how well it went to improve the local economy. So he thought, when he inherited a quarry at Rosebush, he thought, great, we can develop it like North Wales, run regular train services, and we'll all be rich. But it didn't work out like that. He had to promise the Great Western Railway £500 a year to connect his railway with their railway at Clynderwen. So Clynderwen was the junction, and he built his own railway. He didn't get any money from anywhere else, didn't have investors. He found the cash to build his own railway to Rosebush to bring slate out. And it went quite well for a few years. And then there were problems with this. There were problems with the slate. There were problems with the quality of it. They had to stop work for a long time. And he started losing money quite heavily. So the North Pembrokeshire Railway, as it became, closed from time to time. Now, what Edward Cropper had done, he got people in the area interested in railways. And a lot of people thought, well, what can we do? What can we do to bring it back to life? And what they thought they'd do is connect it to somewhere else. You know, obviously, slate wasn't the fantastic financial bonus that they thought it would be. So they thought, well, let's extend the railway. And where should we go? Let's go to Goodwick. So that was the plan. It was developed about 1880, but and they also tried advertising the scenic delights of Rosebush. There are quite a few posters around showing Rosebush as a holiday destination. Those of you who know Tavern Sink will know the sort of thing that was being proposed. And it was quite difficult for them, I think, to sell it for people to go on a holiday to Rosebush. So people didn't. So the line lay dormant for quite a time until construction work started. It was closed in 1882, and work restarted at the end of 1891. So 9 years later, work restarted. A Birmingham solicitor, Joseph Rollers, bought shares in the company until he controlled it. And in 1893, this is key, he put forward proposals to extend the line and construct a pier to operate a ferry service to Ireland in competition with the Great Western services from Nayland. So what he got parliamentary approval to build Fishguard Harbour, which gave him a really strong negotiating point with the Great Western, because the North Pembrokeshire Railway was independent. It was largely owned by Joseph Rowlands and his associates, but he was well connected with the London and North Western Railway, who were the big rivals of the Great Western. So Rowlands bought the Mainclochog Railway for £50,000 on behalf of the North Pembrokeshire and Fishguard Railway. By 1895, work had carried on and they'd got as far as Letterston. Those of you who know where Letterston Station was, there was quite a big area of freight facilities there for the North Pembrokeshire and Fishguard Railway. Rowlands proposed a lot of new lines to link the North Pembrokeshire and Fishguard line with the LNWR. The Great Western were really worried about competition, so were so alarmed that they started negotiations to buy the NP&F, which might have been the objective of Rowlands all along. But in early 1898, it was agreed that Great Western Railway would buy the North Pembrokeshire and Fishguard Railway for £157,500. That still had to be completed to Goodwick, and would be a slow and difficult line to operate, something the Great Western Railway would have to address. So the North Pembrokeshire Railway managed to sell itself to the Great Western on the basis of two things. It was to stop the London and North Western Railway getting a foothold in West Wales, which they were desperate to avoid, and it had powers to build a harbour. Because they got parliamentary approval, it meant they could build a harbour here and get to Ireland a lot more quickly than from Nayland. So, in 1st of July 1899, the line opened as far as Goodwick. And obviously, it opened as far as Fishguard and Goodwick Station, as it is now. There was one platform in the same position as the existing platform and a number of sidings. The Great Western Railway bought a slow railway with limited capacity between Crenderwin and Goodwick, but with approval to build a new harbour and station. What was needed was a faster line to the new harbour, and the Great Western Railway decided to revisit Brunel's 1851 scheme to get to Goodwick, starting from a new junction at Clarbeston Road. 7 miles of earthworks had been completed. There was no severe curves, and the steepest gradient was 1 in 140. So that's fairly flat in railway terms. Brunel had not tackled the Trefgarn Gorge, where the very hard rhyolite rock took a long time and a lot of dynamite to remove. Work started in 1904. Now, obviously, work in the harbour had been going on for quite a long time. Building the railway to the harbour was quite a bit quicker. Spittal Tunnel had the opposite problem from Trefgarn Gorge, with the soft shell frequently collapsing. 2 tracks were provided to Letterston Junction, and then 2 sections of single line from there to Manorowin and Manorowin to Goodwick. Sidings and an engine shed were provided at Goodwick, together with a second platform and a signal box. But the main facilities were provided here at Fishguard Harbour, which had a large new station on the quayside with 12 cranes, where have they gone, and low-level passages to load cattle direct to the ships, as well as a large number of sidings. This station opened on the 30th of August 1906. So, really, the first railway to Fishguard was by chance, really. Somebody inherited a slate quarry. They decided to develop a line to serve the slate quarry. Then they realised that the Great Western Railway would pay a lot of money to avoid competition from the London and North Western Railway. So the Great Western Railway paid through the nose to get a monopoly here in Fishguard. So that's how the first trains got to Goodwick. The service was never that good. There was a fast freight train from here to Paddington, every night. There were cattle trains locally taking the cattle from Ireland to local farms. There was local traffic. There were trains connecting with the boats to Ireland, which had quite good connections to London. But apart from that, if you weren't off a boat from Ireland, you had to change at Clarbeston Road. And we've got some photos somewhere of small locos, 2-coach trains, connecting at Clarbeston Road with trains from Haverfordwest, etc. So it was never that good. There are still gaps in it at the moment, but we're more optimistic, I think, that some of those gaps will be filled in and services will improve. Right, any questions? Yep.
What gauge was it when it arrived at Fishguard?
Sorry, the Great Western had abandoned the broad gauge in South Wales in 1868. They abandoned it in England in 1892, but it was all standard gauge, 4 foot 8.5.
Just when you say they're rich, what's the equivalent price would be today, very roughly?
For the people or the...
Well, Cropper, who was...
Cropper... Well, he was a multimillionaire. I think he'd be a multimillionaire too. Yeah? But, he had a good job. He made a lot of money through city investments.
Did he lose it all?
No.
No?
He sold it. He sold the railway to this solicitor, Joseph Rowlands, for basically, he lost some money. But he didn't lose all his money. He closed the railway rather than lose money. So, quite a canny guy.
No.
Yeah, thanks, Stu.
And to top up the fantastic atmosphere, the Goodwick Brass Band and also the Fishguard and St Dogmael's session musicians were in full swing during the event. It was great to hear some music being performed live right here at the harbour. And that brings us to an end of my visit to the Fishguard Harbour Railway Heritage Day. Beyond all the great content that was available there were also a few stalls featuring lovely railway artwork, photography and genuine antiques, which was a nice bonus to have at an event like this. A huge and sincere well done to the South West Wales Connected Community Rail Partnership for organising this event in brilliant collaboration with Stena Line and Transport for Wales. I really hope that we see more events like this in West Wales. In recent memory, there haven't been many like this, and that I know of at least, and it is so important to hold them, especially many of the people who experienced these railways in their heyday and saw steam in service. Unfortunately, they won't be around forever. That's why I think it's critical that we take the time to capture their stories now and learn more about the history that they have to tell, especially local history like this. I sincerely hope that you've enjoyed this look at the Fishguard Harbour Railway Heritage Day. If you do want to stay updated on any future railway events or any of my other railway related videos, please do subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions about the event or any of the history that's been covered here, please feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.